Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. This is episode 11 of my COVID-19 series. It is June the 7th, 2020. I was in a little bit of a break from my podcast. I did 100 shows. My guest today was on that 100th show. And I got a little break. I was a stay-at-home dad for a little bit until we got daycare, and I got a full-time job as an insolvency counselor, and that's what I do now. And I was going to come back to the podcast at some point. I didn't know when, but COVID-19 kind of brought me back, I would say a little early. So I had to make a few adjustments, like I do it at a specific time on Sunday mornings, and there's no editing, and there's no time to do any of the fancy stuff I did before. This is about connecting with people around the world in this time. It seems more important than ever to talk to people that I know that are having different experiences, that have been affected by the pandemic in different ways, right? And so we can relate, right? Just as an aside, I have a lot of anxiety about this, just traveling from one city to the next, and not necessarily even because of COVID-19, but because there's a state of emergency in my province right now. And there's protests, and there's it feels like the world is on fire right now, and that's kind of how I feel. And I had anxiety before a little bit, which I was controlling, but this kind of it brings up all that stuff. So I would just want anybody listening to know that that's okay. If you have anxiety, just this is not going to be like this for a while. You don't have to fight through it. Just do what you can do, and we need to talk about things like that to try to, everyone's like, oh, just power through, get back to work, let's open it all up, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. But everyone experiences this differently. And so let's talk to as many people as we can. And so I have today Kara Perez. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you for having me.
And you are, tell us what city you live in now.
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Austin. It's probably really hot right now.
Yes, it is.
Maybe too hot sometimes, right?
Yes.
I've been to Austin once. We flew into Houston, and then we visited our friends who were going to who live in College Station, and my friend was a professor at the A&M.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So we took a little trip to Austin on the side. Which was nice. And we had some brisket, and I don't remember exactly where we went, but it was probably one of the better places. But the things you got to do. We went to the graffiti place. What is it called? Graffiti Mountain.
The Hope Gallery is what it's called now, because but it may have been called Graffiti Mountain back in the day.
No, I made that up.
Okay. I don't know.
I took a stab at that. It was cool though. People were spray painting. Like, you can go and do that. Do you ever do that? Have you done it?
Yep. I took my mom when she came and visited, but actually it's no longer there.
Okay.
It's not in the same location anymore. That land got sold, and now they moved it further east.
Wow. So would they just take all the walls down and move them? Or no, they
left the art there, and they were like, "Go make new art somewhere else."
Okay, that's good. At least they're encouraging that. That's
yeah.
It's a nice. Like, Austin is it's different than other Texas cities, right?
Yes, the blue dot in the red ocean.
Yes, so blue meaning Democrat, right?
Yes, and
so it's a lot more. Less guns. What would you say?
Actually, there's still quite a few guns. Like, Texans in general love their guns, even if they're maybe voting for the Democrats. Texans love guns. It's very interesting. So I'm originally from Massachusetts. So I grew up in the Northeast, classic liberal. And then I moved to Texas, and Texas is its own identity. It's a part of the United States South, but when you talk about like the deep South, you're not usually referring to Texas. You're referring to Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And they have their own identity. In Texas, it's caught up in a lot of the Southern identity, but it also has this like cowboy mentality, like I'm settling the range and like I'm my own pioneer. And so I would say the way that comes out most strongly, even in the blue bubble of Austin, is that people feel very strongly about property ownership, and they feel very strongly about guns.
Okay. And how do you feel about either of those things?
I am very anti-gun. And I am conflicted on property ownership, just from like an ethical point of view.
And that who can own property or like who originally bought or had the property to give away anyway?
Yeah, and like the idea of private property seems very odd to me. And then Austin's the most economically segregated city in the United States. So it's very, very clear who owns and who doesn't own property here. And it's just like it's a really interesting city to be in when thinking about property ownership. Also, we have this highway that runs right through the middle of the city called I-35. I think it goes all the way to Canada. And I think so. And it was literally built in the location it's in to separate the white section of town from the black section of town.
Really?
So,
okay.
It's just like it's a very interesting place to be thinking about money and to be thinking about kind of like the ethics and the policies behind money.
Wow. So that's what you mean by economically segregated. Like originally there was a place where people owned and where people, I guess, rented. And that's still the case today? Is it still race divided?
Still very race divided. Now, obviously, like parts of the historically black communities are getting gentrified. So a lot of white people are moving in. And that has not gone super well. There's been a lot of people forced out because also cost of living has gone up. Really, I've been in Austin 8 years, and I make a very like middle class income. I'm not super wealthy, but I'm not broke, and I have seen the cost of living just shoot up. When I first got down here, I was like, "This is so cheap. I'm from Boston. Like,
okay,
that's so expensive." And now I'm like, "This is Boston. This city became Boston.
Really, it became Boston."
So it's not that expensive, but it's just below it. And in another couple years, like Apple's building a campus here. I mean,
really? This
is going to be a top tier like expense city in the next 5 years.
Wow. Okay. So in terms of the community, the black community, then what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Austin is less than 5% black and has been for several years. We have a huge, obviously, like Latino Hispanic population, and we actually have a fairly large Asian American population, but by far, like Austin is a white city, both in terms of its largest demographic and its representation. So a big thing that's happening right now, obviously in line with the protests and this kind of this movement and rebellion in the United States is all eyes are kind of on our city council. But we have a white mayor. We have a predominantly white city council. There's only one black city council member. I think there are 3 Latinos. And so I think, Americans don't vote. Like, this is sort of like our thing. We're like not really into voting, even though we're really into like, don't tell me what to do. And Texas has a really bad voting record. I think we're the 47th state on like who votes. We're like way down at the bottom. Like we don't vote. But recently there's been a lot of engagement with city council. There's been a lot of engagement with the mayor's office. And I'm hopeful that this will wake people up to the power of local policies and local politics and get people, hopefully in marginalized communities, more representation and more protections is kind of my hope.
Yeah. Okay. So we might come back to this. We probably will come back to this. But let's talk about you. So you, I guess we can go back to February. I guess was that when everything was normal again?
Yes.
Was that this year?
I don't know. Who can say?
How many years ago was it that we could gather in groups of people?
25 years ago.
Yeah, seriously. It feels that way. So your company is Bravely Go, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
BravelyGo.co.
BravelyGo.co. It rhymes.
BravelyGo.co. BravelyGo. It's a tongue twister a little bit. So, and you would be putting on financial events is your core, right, of your business?
Yes.
So local in Austin.
Yeah. So I do these, I call them pop-up conferences. And so it'll run from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we'll have several speakers come through and talk about really tactical, intersectional finances. So, debt payoff, investing, negotiation. My audience is predominantly women. And I've done most of my events in Austin, but I've taken them out on the road. We've done one in Boston, Massachusetts. We've done one in Portland.
Nice.
And we were supposed to do one in Miami this year, but that's gone out the window.
Okay,
Miami
so
and LA.
you were going to do both of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
When were those going to be?
LA was going to be mid-September, and then Miami was going to be late October.
Okay. And so you, at a certain point, first of all, you, where were you when the pandemic hit? Were you at home in Austin?
Yes.
Okay. So you're isolated. And at a certain point, you start to realize that maybe you had some events, local events, of course, booked, and
Yes.
that these events are probably not going to happen. What is it mid-March?
Yeah. So in Austin, we have the South by Southwest Festival, which is this big international festival. And so in late February, very late February, the city canceled that. And I mean, that sent shockwaves through everything. And people were furious because that is a huge economic driver for the city, and especially for small businesses. Like, a lot of small businesses will do 40, 50, 60% of their revenue during South by, like their annual revenue. And especially if you're a property owner and you can rent out your house either on Airbnb, or if you own commercial property and you rent it out, like a lot of hotels and hostels and just smaller shops, they'll rent it out so people can have these huge brand parties, and they'll make $100,000 in a week. I mean, it's crazy.
So they count on this.
Yes. So they canceled that, and I was taken aback.
Yeah.
And then I was supposed to have an event April 4th, a conference, and we'd sold a bunch of tickets, and I had all these speakers lined up. And in mid-March, I was just like, I can't do this. Like, there's no way. If they're not doing South by, and it's, the stock market is doing all these crazy things, and everyone's freaking out about coronavirus, like, I just have to cancel it. So I pushed it. It's technically still on the books for October, but I don't see it happening.
No way. Okay. And in the meantime, so you're just kind of taking some time to come to terms with, so what does my future look like in terms of events, right?
Yeah.
And how did that feel at the time?
It felt, I honestly was really sad for a while, because I've been doing my business for three and change years, and I felt like I was just beginning to harvest some of the seeds that I had planted years ago. And then it was like a drought came and all my seedlings died. And I was just like, oh, well, that sucks. And this is something I've spent so much time on that is so uncertain. Even looking into 2021, so many people are not going to want to go to events if there isn't a vaccine, or people aren't going to want to travel. Like, local events maybe will be fine, but even people from Dallas and Houston, which I normally get at some of my Austin events, they might not want to come. So it's just it's a very long timetable. It's a very long timetable for uncertainty. Yeah. And that just was really disappointing, because I'm a company of one. I didn't have like a co-founder to be like, it's okay, we'll rally. I was like, it's okay, we'll rally. Just T-Bone. Yeah, my boyfriend, who doesn't really understand like how my business operates. He's like anytime someone asks him what I do, he's like, well, she talks about money with other people. He's like, I'm not totally clear, which is very funny, because he always helps with my events. Like, he's always my door guy, my ticket guy. He'll be my bartender, and he's always just like, what are you doing?
But he's very supportive.
Very supportive. Couldn't have done the summit, which I ultimately ended up doing, without him, honestly.
So you decide at some point that you're not just going to be sitting and waiting for your events to be possible again, that you're going to pivot and do online. Have you done online events before?
I've done a lot of webinars, 30 to 40 person smaller webinars, but never anything large like a summit.
Yeah. And so you decide that you're going to, was it people who were going to be speaking at your existing events already, or this was from scratch? Totally from scratch. Okay. So what was this event going to be called?
Yes. So I actually had the idea for this summit in maybe December, and I thought maybe I could do a big in-person event. And then obviously I was like, this is going online. So it was called the Financial Feminist Summit. And we had 10 sessions. We had nine speakers, not including myself. And it took place over 2 days. And it was a combination of pre-recorded videos and then Facebook Lives. And we had 3,300 people register.
That's awesome. 3,300. And so that means those 3,300 had access to the videos.
Yes.
Do you have any stats on how many people like actually attended things, or because you're probably expecting a certain percentage of those will just sign up and not show, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like most conferences actually. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
With live events, I always expect, especially this was free. The summit was free.
Yeah.
And anytime something's free, you always have to expect at least a 20% drop off. Like
okay.
that's just industry standard.
Yeah.
And with online stuff, I don't know what the
It's probably even higher.
Yeah, exactly. I would expect that it would be closer to like 40%.
Yeah.
But I was really pleased. I'm trying to pull up my statistics for you so I can get an actual. I'm like, where's my playlist here?
The YouTube. So you would have sent all of us a link to a YouTube playlist.
Yes,
For
that's
the
what I
for the
did.
2 days. And that's where we could access the video, and you couldn't access those videos otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Which people were very upset about, but I was like, you need to register. Like,
yeah. Hey,
you can't just.
yeah, that's there's got to be some way for you to get some benefit from this,
Right.
to track the person, right? Because if, like, that's the thing about posting videos online is sure, like if you get 1 million hits or whatever, maybe you could start advertising, but. For something like this where you curated everything, you at least would want the person's email so you can contact them.
Yes, 100%. 100%. So, okay, this was updated. It says 7 days ago. So this isn't exactly the most up-to-date data. Sorry about that. But so we had 11 videos. I made a little welcome video as well. That was an official session. And we had 11,000 views, 11,304 views. So I think.
That's great.
Yeah, I was very pleased. And my initial goal was 5,000 attendees. So at first I felt really disappointed, like, 3,300, really? Like I didn't hit my goal. But then the feedback that I got from other people who host online events was like, 3,300 for your first time is amazing.
Yeah, seriously.
It's like, oh, well, that sounds
and engagement, right? I mean, you had some great engagement. The comments that were flowing through. I mean, since I have baby responsibilities, I couldn't attend everything fully, but I tried to do as much as I could, especially just going to hear people talk live. That it's nice to watch the videos, but it's good to be part of the discussion. But just the comments that people were leaving, like the inspirational stuff, because some of these sessions were really, really powerful. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my purpose with doing this was really to explore topics that are often ignored. So, for example, we had a session on first generation money. So, what is it like to be the child of an immigrant who obviously comes from outside of the United States and isn't familiar with our money system? And, I had a whole topic called What is Financial Feminism? Because I feel like that's a term that gets thrown around a lot that people haven't actually put thought into, which may be a little bit of a flamethrower here, but people who are like, oh, well, I care about women.
Flame away.
Yes. People confuse the term feminist for just like, I support women, which is a part of feminism, but feminism is a political movement. It's a social and political movement, and it has a very long and very layered history, and that must be a part of the discussion of financial feminism. It can't just be like, let's get rich, ladies. That's, I think, a disservice to the women who have come before us, or the people who have come before us. So,
well, it's similar to any race discussion. It's all about the things that you have to talk about the history.
Yes.
Like, was it 1973? Is getting the year right? The Equal Opportunity
1974. So
is
close.
It Loan Act, the debt, or whatever it's called?
Equal Credit Opportunity Act.
Yeah. So before that, you had to get your husband to sign off on a loan or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, your husband or your father, any woman just like could not get a loan of any sort on her own.
This just sounds so ridiculous to talk about that now, doesn't it? It's like you couldn't go as an individual. You needed to have a man to sign. What if you didn't have a man? What if you're an orphan and you're not with somebody? You just can't get credit. Like, what is that about? And in any case,
yeah,
I don't like the patriarchy. If you can't tell. It doesn't make any sense, right? And again, that doesn't mean that I don't like men. It just means that I don't like men controlling women, right? Like, and all of the stuff that came from. So, like, that's 40 years ago. That's maybe almost 50 years ago. That's not a lot of time for you to let now. So, why would you think that women can just be like, get money and not talk about the struggles along the way? That's what you're saying, right?
Right. Yeah. And honestly, like, what it still needs to be done, both on a political and social level and an economic level. And let's face it, like, women can be terrible. Women are not inherently better than men. Yeah. And women can also be negatively impacted by, like misogyny, like internalized misogyny. So women getting rich is not just like the cure to societal ills, because we are just as susceptible to the ideas of, oh, well, like I want to hoard my money or I want to exploit my workers as are men. So I think I think it's a really easy like rallying call, like let's get rich, ladies. But is it actually moving the needle in creating a more equal and equitable world? Like, probably not long term.
Yeah, I mean the example of the rich white woman in Central Park, right? Who,
yes.
Calls the cops to try to for not having her dog on a leash.
Amy Cooper. Yeah.
How did Amy Cooper get to that point, right? And yeah, it's great. It's great that she's a successful woman, but like you just said, that didn't change any of the behaviors that we're trying to change, right? And like, so like, great, we're creating successful, horrible women now,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. It's more Rockefellers, please, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really, really good point. And so you're talking about I like the word nuance because and Kara has a whole podcast about this. It's called The Fair Sense with Tanya Hester, where you get into the specific divisions of all the different things that go into this, right? Like specific topics, not just like, let's do another episode about feminism in general. It's like toxic masculinity and, all the other things that are involved with making change, right? Because that's what's important. It's not just, like you said, let's get women money. It's not about that. So you did the first gen thing was awesome, because I'm not a first gen. I'm not a woman, of course, too, but I'm not first gen, so I don't know what it's like to have parents who are coming from another country and have different values of money and different outlook, and maybe expect me to take care of them as well. That was part of it too, right? Yeah.
The expectation put on children of immigrants for like, well, you'll be my retirement plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am the child of an immigrant, so I'm first gen on my dad's side, who's from Dominican Republic. But on my mom's side, like I grew up in the house that my mom grew up in, that on the street that my grandfather grew up on. Like,
wow.
So for me, it's a part of my own personal narrative, but it's also not a part of my personal narrative. And I think for that session in general, we got a lot of really positive feedback from people who are not first gen, who were just like, wow, I had never considered this before. Thank you for opening my eyes. Yeah. And so I think too, like so often people are, we're getting more and more siloed in our own beliefs and our own very small worlds, even though we have more access online to different thoughts and different people than literally ever before. But we're getting isolated in these things. And I think it's so important to say to people, this doesn't have to apply to you for you to still learn about it, for you to be interested in it, or for you to take time and say, actually, I'm not interested, but at least I listened for 15 minutes before I completely wrote it off.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a few more highlights from the summit.
Yeah, so you mentioned the engagement. The engagement was amazing in the Facebook group. People were talking to each other. They were talking to me. They were talking to the speakers. And I got so many incredible notes after the summit ended from people who felt really seen, really celebrated. And they felt like even people who were further advanced in their own financial world, they're like, honestly, this was pretty basic for me because like I understand what a budget is. I have my 401k on point. But I haven't found a community that is so excited about nuance yet.
Yes.
And that's what I'm here for, is that I know I could come in with my own question, even if it is finance 2.0, 3.0, and people are going to be really excited and help me see it from a new point of view. And that I was like, oh, this is so exciting.
Because that's you, because you talk about intersectionality all the time, and you also like to say that you can't talk about personal finance without talking about politics, right?
Yes.
And people like to throw the word politics around, like right now, like somehow being anti-racist is politics. It's just being a human being. It's not. There's nothing political about being against racism, right? And if somebody tries to tell me that, I don't know what to say to them, right? Like, oh, it's controversial. No, it's not. Yeah. Don't be a racist. Yeah. Right. Like it sounds pretty clear to me, right? So let's talk about intersectionality because I think people don't quite understand that if they're going to a conference and they see 5 white guys on the panel talking about something, even if it has nothing to do with if it's not about race or gender specifically, let's say, right? Which people like to think, oh, if I'm not talking about that, I don't have to have diversity. But that's not true. Intersectionality is everything, different perspectives, different values, different attitudes.
Yes. So the idea of intersectionality as it applies to feminism was coined in 1989 by a Black woman named Kimberly Crenshaw, and she's still alive. She's killing it. She is a lawyer and a professor and amazing. So I really encourage everyone to look up her and her work. But I kind of take the work that she created and apply it through an economic financial lens. And so that can be, your race, your gender, your able-bodiedness, something that I talk about, or something I think about a lot, is like pretty much all of my aunts and uncles, they moved here when they were in their teens in large part, except for my youngest uncle. He moved here when he was like 4 or something. But there's an accent, and I'm like, that is also something. People judge accents, and sometimes they are, like Americans love British accents. We're enamored with British accents. So sometimes the judgment is a positive one, but sometimes it's a negative one. So even something like that, if you call up a bank and you're trying to figure out, how to get a loan and you have an accent, that can be impacting how you're being treated, how you're maybe going to be accepted as a client. So it sounds kind of overwhelming, but I actually find a lot of freedom in the concept of intersectionality, because it's like I have permission to address these parts of myself and these parts of other people. And what I said at the summit was like, when we talk about Black money, I'm not Black. Like, I don't have that experience. It's not my family. But it's okay, because this is an opportunity for me to pass the mic. It's for me to say, hey, I have this audience. Some of them are Black. Some of them are not. They all need to hear about this anyway. Here, Black friend, like, please come in and share your world with us. Like, it shouldn't be, I think of intersectionality as permission to engage rather than like punishment for drawing attention to this,
Yeah, the opening it up, right? What I can do as a very privileged white male is amplify voices. Right? I mean, I have a podcast, which is great, right? You can amplify in a lot of different ways. But it makes so much sense to me to have everyone's perspective, right? Because you just expanding your mind, right? But I'm not sure why people want to stay so closed off. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The more that I experience this, and the more that someone tries to say, we don't want politics in this, and we don't want to have to talk about these hard issues. Well, the only reason why is because they don't have to face those issues every day. And how does it feel for everybody else? Right?
Yeah, I think too it is a lot of fear. Like in the United States, we have very clear power structures that I think especially white people are maybe not specifically cognizant of, but we know our lives are better than Black people, and we want to hold on to that. Like, we're afraid if we address the issue, if we talk about it, A, we have to accept ownership, and B, what if we lose? What if someone treats us like Black people? Like, that is truly the fear. That is truly the fear of a lot of white people who wouldn't call themselves racist, but they're like, we can't even talk about it because otherwise I'm going to lose this power. And that's a really hard thing to accept about yourself, that like, I like the power that I have, even though I know not everyone has this power. And it's much easier to just be like, it's so rude to talk about that than it is to be like, it's rude that I have this belief.
Yeah, so we made up this thing to make ourselves feel better about not talking about it so that we could keep our power because, you know, I don't even know what to say sometimes. It's just, you know, why oppression is just so built into this, the history of the world. And, you know, I tried looking back. I'm sure you've done this too. You know, how did this all begin? It's just, this is human civilization.
Yeah.
This is how it began. And that's terrible. And a lot of us have, I mean, I like to say evolved to better thinking, that we're no better than anybody else, or, you know, no worse for that matter. But it's taking so long to get to that point.
Yes. Yeah, it really is a part, you know, and at our very basic human level, humans create in-groups and out-groups, and that makes us feel more secure. If there's someone that we know that we are, whether it's better than or safer than or literally like more full, like I have food, they don't, it makes us feel more safe. It just does. I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist or anything, but this is kind of a basic principle. And I do think that that is something that is going to be a challenge, especially with nearly 8 billion people in the world, all of us with our own biases and preferences and everything. It's going to be a long time till we're all sitting around singing Kumbaya together. But I also think we can't stop challenging ourselves. And something that I've really been working on just personally in the last year, I think a lot of people in our personal finance world think of me as very woke. And I've gotten a lot of questions, especially recently, from people in our space of like, how can I talk about this? You talk about this all the time. How can I get involved in the conversation? Yeah. Which has made me feel very uncomfortable in some ways, because I'm such a flawed person. And there are many mistakes I have made in the past. And there are many mistakes I'm making now that like Kara 5 years from now is going to be like, what the hell? What were you doing? You know? Yeah. So what I want to say to everyone is, like, you can't be afraid of the mess, whether that's professionally, personally, with race issues. Like, I made a lot of mistakes with the summit. I had a lot of technical issues, but like, you just got to keep moving forward, you know? It's like, I did the best I could. I apologized. I tried to make sure everyone got the videos if they missed the first email that went out. And like, next time I'll use different equipment. You know, it's the same with our approach to race and equality. Like, I know I've made some unsavory comments in the past, or I've never thought about this. I've just totally lived in my white privilege world. Now is the time to start thinking about it. Now is the time to challenge yourself and to grow.
Yeah, and to not just rest on that, like, oh, this is how I am. It's, but continually learning, being not afraid of disappointing, not afraid of making mistakes.
Yes.
People do that as long as you it means something to you. You know, I work with, as an insolvency counselor, with people who have just filed basically the equivalents of Chapter 7 or 13 bankruptcy in the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. And so they have to do 2 counseling sessions with me. And, you know, it's really about the only thing that I really want to get from them, the very base minimum, is that they learn something, right? If you went through this process and you didn't learn something, what's the point, right? You get a fresh start, right? You start from zero, in terms of debt, right? It's all cleared out, right? Whether you get a reduced thing that you pay to us for 5 years, or a bankruptcy where you pay just a little bit and then you actually do start from zero, the opportunity is there. You made a mistake or a series of mistakes. You learn from those, you get a second chance. That doesn't happen in a lot of countries. It's harder to do in the U.S. You got to get a lawyer, you got to pay, and it's really prohibitive versus Canada. So we're very lucky here to have automatic things you don't have to go to court for. So to be able to apply that to just everything in your life, to accept making mistakes. I think that's probably a huge part of this, right? Like, in terms of politicians being able to apologize for things, everyone just feels like they need to be right all the time, and that's not the way to lead. There's no accountability there, and there's no progress.
Yeah, I love what you said. Like, the opportunity is there. I think what we need to do better as people is encourage people to take that opportunity. And especially, oh my God, the politician thing, you're so spot on. And, here we're big fans of, like, if you've changed your mind publicly, we'll call you a flip-flopper. And people will be like, well, how can we trust you? And it's like, well, I didn't know this information before when I made that first statement. And now I learned new information. So you can trust me to grow and change. Like, I'm not getting paralyzed. Yeah. I think it's wild. I mean, the media, the pundits, the political pundits, can we just get rid of political pundits? Like, no more. Okay. We don't need any Tucker Carlsons. We don't just need these people who is
Tommy?
Tommy Lauren. Yeah. Tomato.
Yeah, drives me nuts.
She is ridiculous.
I try not to watch too much of that stuff, but
yeah, no, you can't. But it's just like it's anti-helpful is what I want to say. Like, it's not helpful to hold people to standards from who they were 2 years ago, 10 years ago. We have to remember that we're all changing and we're all growing, and some people are really, really working at it and really trying hard to grow and change, and that should be applauded, not slammed.
It makes me remember. So our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he there's photos or video of him in blackface like 10 years ago or something like that. Well, at a time when it was actually not absolutely terrible, apparently, to do this for like a Halloween or something, right? There was a time, right? I could even remember probably in the 90s when so many things in the 90s were like so wrong now, right? As you were saying earlier in the episode, we're going to look back in 5 years and say, wow, I did that, right? So great. He looks back and he regrets it, and so they keep bringing it up, and I don't know how productive that is. Right? If he kept saying, oh, yeah, I was totally justified and I love blackface and things like that, well, then, of course, that's not a bad thing. But we all make mistakes, and people love to do that to politicians, right? Doesn't excuse what he did at the time, right? I mean, I went to a play where, some of the older plays that are still in production, they had a scene where there was blackface, and they did that. And I was like, no, don't do it. Just because it's written in, right?
Right.
It's like if you ever read an old book and it's got like terrible either homophobic slurs or something in it, and you're like, do I have to read this?
Yeah.
As is? I'm like, do I have to honor the text? That's a good question, right? It was written then, but you're reading it now. These things make a difference, though, right? Like you can't keep saying these things now because it affects our future behavior.
Yeah. Oh man. I think about that all the time, especially because, especially with books, like the United States or the Western canon is something that I have a real big issue with because it's mostly old white dudes.
Yes,
Frankly, half of them are not good writers. Like, not good writers.
Okay.
But I do think language has changed so much, both from a more equitable point of view, but also just in the way that we use words. Like, words have evolved and they don't mean the same things. I remember learning in high school, I did a play, King Richard III, for a Shakespeare play, and they used jealous, a word we still use, but they use it to mean suspicious. Like, I am jealous of this man.
Yes.
There was this whole book that we all had to read about how the words had changed. And I'm like, honestly, half of the stuff in the canon that we make kids read in high school and stuff, we don't need to read anymore. It's not helpful. It's not productive. And our society has really moved beyond it. But then also I'm like, but if we forget our history, what does that do to future generations? So I see both sides. I do think it's important that we look back and know where we've come from. But I also think if it's not being taught by someone who can say, think critically about this and understand how we've evolved and how this is not, I'm not holding this up as a model of what to do. I'm holding this up as an example of what we have already done. Then it can be very useless. So those are just my unfiltered thoughts on that.
It's all unfiltered today. There's no editing, right? You made me think of we have all these old kids songs that play on these devices that we have. I haven't looked into the background of the song "This Old Man," but I know the lyrics inside out now. So this old man, he played knick-knack on his thumb with a knick-knack paddywhack, give a dog a bone. This old man came rolling home. There's probably something terrible in there.
What does that mean?
What does it mean? It's probably something I don't even want to know what knick-knack paddywhack, give a dog a bone means. Right? What does it mean? Why are we still saying these things that make no sense, right? Just because it's catchy, right? You know, there's an old song called Chicolo Chan that my mom used to sing, and no longer, please, right? Because it is not good, not good. Right, but that was what she grew up in, so she's got it in her head, and she might sing it because it's catchy. So we have to look at all of these things and the way that we say things and the way and of course it comes to a head these days with Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. People are trying to think that they're saying the right thing by saying all lives matter, and they don't understand, right? It's the words that you use make a difference, right? And there's a million different ways to try to explain the difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, and you go look that up, please. If you're not sure, just go look it up, right? Like, this house is on fire, but all houses matter, right? Well, this one's on fire right now. Can we put that out, please? No, what about my house? What if it, it needs some work on the side? Yeah, but it's not on fire, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know. I like that one. Do you have one that makes more sense?
Not off
or
the
just
top of my head.
No, yeah. But yeah, people can look this up themselves, right? And I mean, I don't know. Can you talk about how, it's not the oppressed person's responsibility to explain oppression, right?
Yeah. So this is something that you'll hear from a lot of people in marginalized communities. Like, it's not my job to teach you how to treat me like a person. Like, that should be something that you can do on your own. Especially, again, in terms of education, like, you can Google anything. You can Google how to not be a racist, or why don't Black people teach me how to be nicer to Black people? Like, you can Google that, and Google will spit out 15,000 articles written by people of color, specifically Black people, to be like, here's why. But thinking of it as more of a kind of a big picture thing, I can understand people like, well, it makes sense. If you want me to know about your experience, you should teach me. But what they're really saying is, I am currently dealing with your oppression. Like, even as we are having this conversation, we are still living in a world where I am not equal to you. And I have to deal with that as I educate you. Are you kidding me? So now I have double the burden. Like, at least let me just deal with the burden of racism or sexism. And then you, as the person who is maybe inadvertently oppressing me, like, you go take the time to read that book, bro. That's right? What they're saying.
And I'm trying to balance this too, right? Because I want to amplify voices. I want to have you on to talk about the summit and the things, the community that you're building and your experience. But I mean, I cross the line, I'm sure, all the time with asking you to explain things to me, right?
Well, so that's another interesting thing. Well, like, obviously I am in the world as a woman, so I'm experiencing sexism, but I'm also white passing, and part of our responsibility as white people is to do some more of the legwork. So, like, part of my responsibility as a white woman, as an ally to women of color, is to have conversations with you about racism. Yes. So that's something I was just this always sounds weird, but I was just talking to a Black friend of mine, and she was like, man, I'm feeling really, really, like, weighed down. I'm always feeling weighed down because of racism, but like last week was really hard. And I was like, yeah, I completely understand that. I want you to know I'm talking to a lot of the white people in my life right now. Yeah. And she was like, thank you, like, all caps, because otherwise she would have to do it, right? And that would be the burden on her. So that is our responsibility. But now when it comes to, like, sexism, like, sometimes T-Bone and I have this conversation a lot where T-Bone is like, well, but you're so knowledgeable. And I'm like, because I've lived it. Because I've been in rooms with you where people only talk to you and they won't talk to me, especially around money and stuff. And T-Bone doesn't know anything about money. T-Bone knows what he's learned from me, but he doesn't have an interest in it. It's not a passion. He's like, tell me what to do and I'll just do it. But also don't tell me what to do because I hate being told what to do.
Texas, right?
T-Bone. Yes, Texas. And so, yeah, it is. I do think we all kind of have to walk a line, which sounds like we always need to be on eggshells, but it's genuinely just using your common sense. Like right now in the United States, around the world, we're having this moment of active anti-racism. Use your common sense. Don't go to your friends of color and be like, how can I do better? Go to Google. Realize that they're dealing with a lot right now. And if we were having this moment and it was focused on like women's rights, you would maybe go to your black male friend and be like, how can we do better for the ladies in our life, right? And that's just common sense. That's not like a huge burden that people should be taking on. So I think it's easier than we think it is, but it's also like, think it through, bro.
Yeah, think it through. And don't go to the default hide away to protect your privilege thing, which it's so easy to do because it's the comfort zone, right?
Yes.
And this doesn't have, to think this doesn't have anything to do with me, so why should I have to get involved? And, I'm doing what I consider to be the base minimum here and talking about this stuff, right? And I have Cassandra Descent coming on next week, and she is a person of color. She is a black woman. I got to distinguish those things, right? Because everybody's, it's about black people in the States right now. It's not, right? It's not about being a person of color. It's a very clear distinction. And it's something that I don't understand very much, right? But we have it here in Canada too, right? We've had with this. And I've probably mentioned this to you. You should listen to the Secret Life of Canada podcast if you're ever curious, because it talks about all the bad stuff in Canada, and we try to pretend like we're so innocent, right? Underground Railroad, we saved everyone, right? Maybe we did, but there's also lots going on, right? And lots about the people immigrating from the Caribbean and things like that too, and how they were treated, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot. No one is immune to this. No one is not involved in this. And it's like you said it best, being a good person, being kind to someone, right? I mean, it applies to the using people's pronouns that they like, and anything that another human being would like you to do. It's not about oppressing you or taking away your rights. It's about being a good person and respecting your fellow person. It sounds simple, doesn't it?
It does sound so simple. And again, like, leave room for mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, particularly with pronouns. Like, not so much one-on-one with people. I'm very good at being like, what are your pronouns? I got it. Perfect. But when I'm doing podcasts and stuff, I will default to like he or she instead of just saying they. Like, just say they.
It's tough, right?
But it is, because of course I've spent the first 30 years of my life saying he or she.
Built-in.
So I'm just trying to challenge that narrative in my own brain, and I've made mistakes, but guess what? I'm still out here trying. Or like on the podcast that I have, Ferris Ends, for the first like 2 seasons, I would say, like when referring to periods and menstruation, I would always say women, but now I'm like, people who get periods, you know? And like, that's growth, baby. That's growth. Like, I am sorry in the past, but like, I wasn't aware, and now I'm aware, and I'm moving forward.
And I mean, I just found out yesterday about J.K. Rowling and her transphobia.
Oh my God.
We could do a whole episode about that.
I just found that out like this morning, and I'm like, what happened?
Oh, just this morning? Okay, because it's blowing up. Yeah, and I know what a turf is now. And so there's like, you can learn things if you open your eyes. So. Okay, so what's the next thing for you to continue this? Do you have another conference in the works, or what? Like, how are you doing? Like financially, and because you got to pivot, right?
Yeah, got to pivot. I'm doing okay. Mentally, emotionally, financially, doing okay. I definitely have taken some hits, obviously, with COVID. Lost some speaking gigs, lost some opportunities. I don't work with that many brands, but a few, and brand dollars dried up.
They have less money too.
Yeah. So that's a bummer. In terms of next steps for Bravely Go, we'll be doing the conference again, the summit again. I think it'll be next year. I don't think we'll do another one this year. Maybe. We'll see how it goes. But for me, it really is at this point, I've built a community and we've seen a lot of growth in the last 3 months, especially. And so for me now, I want to focus on the people that are there as well as keep pushing forward. But it's important. Like, we live in this growth mindset, right? Like, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing.
I know, 10x.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not for me. I'm tired, okay? I would rather honor the people that have already shown up for me than push them out of the way as I try and get more people to show up for me.
Yeah,
you know?
that's great.
So that's where my head's at. I don't know specifically what that looks like, but that's where my head's at.
Yeah, good. And there's, this is the time to do that and to... we need to think of the alternate ways to do what we do, and not. I mean, if we just sit and hope for it to come back, we could do that, and maybe you can survive. Financially, a lot of us can. I know you said you've built up a nice emergency fund, perhaps, right? And of course, I want you to come on and tell your full, debt repayment and struggle story to make this company in the future. That's definitely worth waiting for. But the the idea here is we can't keep doing what we're doing and expecting the world to come back to what it was.
Yeah,
it'll be different.
Yeah,
a little bit at least, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Even if, they announce a vaccine tomorrow and everybody goes and gets it, businesses have learned, maybe we don't need everyone in the office. So like more people will be remote or more employees will be empowered to negotiate for remote work because they have 3-4 months of experience doing it. Cities are seeing... Like New York is a good example. They've been closing off certain streets so that people can go out and socially distance. And so I wonder if people will be less reliant on cars and want to walk more and, experience their city in different ways. And I've also heard from several friends who are in real estate that there's going to be a very clear trend of people wanting to get out of cities into areas where they can have a backyard, and they aren't crammed into these apartments are on top of everyone. And I have a backyard and that has been a huge blessing for this quarantine time. So I'm never not having a yard.
Yeah, not going forward, right? That's become the priority. And I used to think it'd be fine to be in another concrete box again if I wanted to, or if it was necessary. But yeah, now I wish I had a bigger yard. We have enough room to put a swing for Henry, and which is great. And for Kayla loves gardening, so she is able to do that. While she's waiting to go back to medical school in person, but she's doing it online. A lot of people, their lives have been interrupted. If you still have a job, you're lucky in this case. I mean, in the States especially, with 40 million unemployed, is that the number these days?
Yes,
that's a lot.
I think it's they just released a jobs report yesterday or Friday, I guess. And so I haven't looked at it. It might have changed slightly, but I don't know if it changed for good or bad. So,
but give or take,
million,
right?
Let's say,
but at one point it was that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And, some people are getting back. You said you're in a later stage of reopening now in Texas or Austin specifically?
Yeah, Texas. So we're pretty far along in reopening, whereas I think New York City starts reopening phase 1 on Monday.
Yeah. We're in phase 1 now. What are the rules? Can you gather with people? What are the?
Yeah, so we're not supposed to be gathering in groups of more than 10 or 10, maybe 12. But the first round was restaurants and bars could reopen at 25% capacity.
Yep.
And then the second round was hairdressers, massage parlors, I'm trying to think of other things. They could open at 25% capacity. And then the restaurants and bars went up to 50% capacity.
Okay.
And so now I think we're entering the third wave, and that is restaurants and bars can open up to between 50 and 75%. And people, we still have to wear masks and we still have to do the 6 feet thing, but businesses in Texas are not required to mandate a mask inside. Like some states are saying, listen, if we're going to open up, everyone has to wear a mask. And again, in Texas, we're like, you can't tell me what to do. Right. So some businesses are like, you have to wear a mask. And some businesses are like, you don't. And that's, I think, an interesting divide, because like, I'm not going to go into a business where there aren't people wearing masks. I'm like, that's messed up. What are you doing?
Yeah. Because both people are wearing masks. It's been proven to actually be quite effective, right?
Right.
But just like as our prime minister said, speaking moistly at others, it happens if you don't wear a mask. You can't get the moisture onto somebody else. It's horrible the way to say it, by the way. If you're protected, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that I think we're just going to have to see how all of these different ways work, right? I mean, if there's second waves, or if it's an acceptable amount of people are getting sick, in terms of the number of ventilators that exist in the hospitals, then that might be the new normal, right? So we go out, we do what we do, we try to protect, but people are getting sick and people are dying. I don't know what an acceptable rate of that is, but I think that's the struggle that's happening in all of the U.S. right now, and the whole world, is how do we balance living our lives versus the risk of the pandemic, you know, and that's tough. I don't know. I'm not a politician, but I'm realizing more and more how difficult it is to be one.
Yeah, man. I used to have big dreams of running for president, like 100%. I was like, I'm going to be the president. I'm ready for this. And now I'm like, I don't want to be the president. That sounds awful. That sounds like a terrible, terrible job.
In a situation like this, especially. Yeah. So, I mean, all we can do is just, try to, follow the rules if we can, and balance and try to just navigate through this time. But really, it's like a pause right now. We're on pause until we get these definite rules, and then you can make more concrete decisions. But in terms of what's happening right now, let's just talk about it and try to find some peace in the world in all of this. Can the police just stop hurting people? That's what I would like. That's bottom line, right? We can have protests, we can have order, we can have restrictions and enforcement and stuff, but why you got to kill people?
Why you got to kill people? Like, yes, 100%.
Right? By accident or not by accident, whatever it is. Like there's, I don't know if it was Chris Rock, but his face has been posted everywhere saying this. But like there's situations where you can't have a couple of bad apples, right?
Yeah, like, that was Chris Rock.
We have like 2 bad pilots. They always crash their planes.
Yeah.
But only those 2, right? What, they're gonna keep doing it? Like, they always crash. 71 incidents of violence against a person, a police officer can have. How many is too many?
Yeah.
Before they stop being a police officer and go do anything else to make money.
Yeah.
You don't have to be that person. If I'm going to say like 1 or 2 to 3, 4, 5 incidents. I don't know what the number is, but it's not 71. That is just wrong.
No. And
I don't understand the system if that's how it works. You can have 71 complaints against you and still be a police officer. I don't understand that at all. So, these are the kind of things that are coming to light, which is good. And we can investigate these and try to make sense of them. And if anything comes from, if that's what comes from this and there's some kind of reform, then I guess we just have to keep accepting the baby steps that are being made, right? As all of history.
Yeah. I'll take anything moving forward. But, exactly to your point, there are some things that must be made unacceptable. Just flat out, here is the line. No. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's a great way to end this. I'm glad I started the podcast up again, just to be able to have conversations about this so people can listen to and maybe just learn something or hear something they haven't heard before, about how we're all dealing with what's happening right now what you're doing to try to continue to educate the world about personal finance, but also the intersectionality and people's experiences that we don't ever see. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
All right, so next week I'm going to have Cassandra Desant coming on. She'll tell me how to pronounce her last name. She is Canadian, though I believe she grew up in, I think she said Trinidad, or was born in Trinidad.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and so, but she's spent, I think, most of her life in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. We'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff next week, because she's been great and very vocal on Twitter about anti-racism, and it's really good to keep this conversation going, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'll see y'all next week.